This timeline was snark. Every soul welcome, but no recorders. Baptized by laughter in the dark. We stand tall, scorning fake orders. In the church of law we rise, with chaos and shenanigans bright. Sharpening sarcasm of rise. Together we light up the night.
Hey everyone, it's Mo from Mo in the Deep End, and we will be looking at the Frank's memo from the defense in the Delphi case, so the Richard Allen case. And there's a couple things I wanted to kind of go over before we got into this. This is considered a third-party guilt sort of thing, and thus far, Judge Gohl has refused to allow this evidence in. So this is not evidence that will be being utilized in the trial, at least at this point. The defense did put a motion in to try to bring in third-party guilt, but as of right now, I think she has denied that again. But I did want to kind of give you guys, I do have videos of the, Frank's motion, but I wanted to be able to kind of go over it live with you and answer any questions, or we can try to look at what's been brought up with the trial, because a lot of people haven't had time to read this. This is a 136 page, at least in this format, motion. So it's incredibly dense. It's incredibly filled with a lot of information. And I don't tell you guys what to believe, but this is a highly sourced and sourced directly from the discovery document. This is not something where the defense attorneys kind of sat in a corner and, threw darts on like different scenarios. This comes from the discovery, and it is very dense. It is very, packed with information. And it's honestly the longest motion I've ever seen doing trials. But let's get into it. The memorandum in support of the accused motion for a Frank's hearing. Now, a Frank's hearing is, when you are trying to bring a third party or, some kind of other guilt or other person that you would like to bring up. It's kind of like a Dobbs hearing in the Zachariah Anderson case. So you do have to prove that what you're saying is, it has some basis in reality. You are not just, arguing man, bear, pig, did it instead. Comes now the accused Richard Allen by and through counsel Andrew J. Baldwin and Bradley A. Rossi, and files his memorandum in support of his request for a Frank's hearing. This is going to be a long one, and I love me some footnotes. In its introduction, footnote number 1, for the court's convenience, the defense has provided a glossary of names marked as Exhibit 125. This glossary provides an alphabetized list of almost every name mentioned in the memorandum, along with a brief description of their involvement. Welcome, Taryn and Greedy Bloke and Wolfram. Thank you for joining today. So, introduction. Because the facts in this memorandum are dense for anyone not yet completely familiar with the case, the defense is providing an introductory section similar to a syllabus that often precedes long and complex U.S. Supreme Court opinions. The purpose of this introductory section is to provide the court a general understanding of what to expect concerning the facts upon which the defense will be relying, and how those facts impact legal arguments before providing the necessary detail, minutia, notation to the record that could bog down the court as it attempts to unpack defense arguments. The defense, therefore, will provide little attribution as to the source of the evidence in this introductory section, but then will provide proper attribution to the sources of the evidence throughout the body of the memoranda, including the introduction. So they've got a table of contents, 8 things to know, Odinism, runes, things like that, failure to pursue. So this is a long and dense, you know, actual memoranda. This is, very complex. And it's a lot of kind of getting things or getting to know things. So I found it very helpful that they added these, introductory section because I I hadn't been deep digging into the case as much. So there were a lot of names and faces and things that I didn't realize. And then to bring in this particular, scenario of Odinism, Norse paganism, all of this other stuff. I mean, it is such I remember thinking man, bear, pig. I am not going to lie to you guys. I was like, "Defense, I wanted to like you, and you're bringing man, bear, pig into this?" Until I read this. And I will tell you that I was quite skeptical going into this document. I thought that, "Oh my gosh, what are they trying to prove here?" But the first section in the introductory section, 8 things to know. Overwhelming evidence in this case supports the following. Number 1, members of a pagan Norse religion called Odinism, hijacked by white nationalists, ritualistically sacrificed Abigail Williams and Liberty German. 2, very early on, those in charge of the Delphi murder investigation claimed that they consulted with a Purdue professor concerning what resembled possible Odinist or Odinism signatures left behind at the crime scene. After the Purdue professor proclaimed, according to State Trooper Jerry Holman, that it was or that quote it was not Odinism or any type of cult worshiping or any type of group that would have conducted this crime, the Odinism angle was essentially abandoned. However, as of September 7th, 2023, the leaders of the Delphi investigation team, 1, claimed they can identify who the purported professor was, 2, have provided no reports from this purported professor, and 3, have further indicated that they may never be able to figure out who this professor is. Now, flash forward to a couple months after this was filed, we do have the name of that professor from Purdue, and they said absolutely, the exact opposite. In fact, things were changed very close to the start of the trial where suddenly the state police found out who this professor was, and that professor kind of negated everything that Jerry Holman said. Now, it's up for the jury to decide whether they can trust things that Jerry Holman have said or has said on the stand. They are the ultimate finders of fact. But this is you're going to start noticing a pattern of the state or unified command either not giving over discovery, you know, possibly shifting things so the defense couldn't find them, or outright lying about where a professor is or if we could actually find them. Based in large part on this mystery professor's or Purdue professor's opinion, the Delphi investigative leadership claimed that it essentially abandoned considering Odinite involvement in the murders. And then the years passed 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. Thankfully, during those passing years, law enforcement officers Kevin Murphy, Gary Ferenczi, and Todd Click continued to pursue the truth. Because of their curiosity and investigative efforts, the evidence establishing the names of the likely members of this murdering Odinite cult became known to the Delphi investigative leadership no later than February 2018. So that's just 1 year after the murder that this sort of semi-independent group of investigators brought all of this information, to unified command. Due to either incompetence or concerted intentionality, those in charge of the investigation refused to arrest or even properly investigate these obvious suspects. 3. On May 1st, 2023, the state of Indiana, by way of prosecutor Nick McLeland, received a letter from a former Rushville Assistant Police Chief Todd Click, who is now retired. 2. Find attached certified mail receipt showing that Carroll County Prosecutor's Office received the letter on May 1st, 2023, marked as Exhibit 1. Welcome, Christine. As stated in the previous paragraph, Click, Murphy, and Ferenczi were three of the law enforcement officers who worked on the Delphi murder case, particularly focused on the Odinite angle as it intersected with suspects in Brushville, Indiana. After reading Richard Allen's probable cause affidavit, Click became concerned that information contained in Richard Allen's affidavit, pointing the finger at Richard Allen, was far less compelling than the totality of information that Detective Ferenczi, Detective Murphy, and Officer Click had accumulated during the Rushville portion of the investigation. Information that Murphy, Ferenczi, and Click had gathered during their investigation connected men who practiced Odinism in or near Delphi with another group of men who lived in Rushville, and then connected both group of men to the murders. 3. Find attached the affidavit of Todd Click, marked as Exhibit 2. So Todd Click sent in his kind of alternate, basically these three who had kind of gone against the grain in Unified Command. They felt so uneasy about the probable cause affidavit that he made sure that they sent, yes, Officer Click was the officer arrested. It does seem rather interesting that he got arrested as he was trying to expose maybe an investigation that wasn't done very correctly. But I haven't looked into his possible arrest or why he has been arrested. I'm still trying to catch up, so I will have to look more into that. Click was concerned that for some reason, leadership of the investigative team failed to share with prosecutor McClelland the evidence gathered by Click, Ferenczi, and Murphy. Click's concern led him to seek out a lawyer to assist him in drafting a letter. This letter was sent to McClelland. 4. A copy of that letter is attached here too and marked as Exhibit 3. And Ferenczi was killed in an attack on a Terre Haute FBI office, ambushed and Molotov cocktailed by a former guard at Westville Correctional Center. This letter was not provided to the defense until after it was obvious from the last round of depositions that the defense, who had doggedly pursued witnesses as far away as Georgia, would certainly be talking to Todd Click. McClelland had this letter in his possession for over 4 months before turning it over to the defense. There can be no mistaking that this letter is exculpatory in nature and would have or could have been used by the defense as it prepared for upcoming depositions. However, it is apparent that McClelland only offered up the letter after it was obvious that the defense team would soon be learning of the letter's existence. In other words, the defense team would obviously be meeting with or deposing Click in the next few weeks. At that time, Click would most certainly reveal to the defense that in April 2023, he, Click, had sent a letter containing exculpatory information to McClelland. At this point, McClelland had two distinct choices. 1, sit on exculpatory evidence, hoping the defense team would refocus its efforts on another angle of the investigation, or 2, disclose the exculpatory evidence, claiming that the contents of the letter were overlooked in the volume of discovery. He chose the latter. Unfortunately for the state, neither approach explains away the fact that Click specifically directed the letter to McClelland himself, and further, Click was so determined to ensure his information was consumed by Mr. McClelland that he directed the information directly to McClelland via certified mail. The letter is stamped, received May 1st, 2023, Carroll County Prosecutor. Click's report landed at Ground Zero, a prosecutor's office, with no more than two full-time prosecutors and a handful of full-time staff members at best. Could this exculpatory evidence have been completely overlooked? Not plausible. Not only did the prosecution withhold the letter from the defense, but law enforcement also withheld several other exculpatory pieces of evidence, including an 85-page compilation of reports by Click prepared in 2019 and several videos containing statements that support the defense's theory of Richard Allen's innocence. This 85-page report detailed the investigative work performed by Click, Forensi, and Murphy, and others, including the FBI. According to a summary of Click's investigation that he attached with his letter, quote, the Behavior Analyst or Analysis Unit, BAU of the FBI, determined that individuals responsible for the homicide were involved in Nordic beliefs. Footnote 5. Find attached the summary that Click attached with his letter, marked as Exhibit 4, Odinists have Nordic beliefs. This was news to the defense, as no member of the unified command in charge of the investigation revealed this information to the defense during recent depositions. This includes Trooper Holman, who told the defense he didn't remember if the FBI's BAU unit determined one way or another whether those with Nordic beliefs had been involved in the murders. Footnote 6. The defense will be providing all depositions identified throughout this document separately from the exhibits and will identify the depositions with letters for purposes of the record. So they're going to impeach him with what he said in his deposition. And obviously, if he excluded these findings, this is a bad look. At least up until the time of this filing, the prosecution has provided no evidence whatsoever of the findings of the FBI's BAU unit concerning involvement of Odinists in the murders. None. The letter that Click sent to McClelland was the first that the defense had heard that the FBI actually believed that Odinists were likely involved. In other words, this report contained exculpatory evidence that Unified Command concealed from the defense. This information was and is critical for Richard Allen's defense. Some of this exculpatory evidence in the form of videos was finally released to the defense on September 8, 2023, over 9 months after defense counsel entered their appearance. The defense is still reviewing this September 8th evidence dump. In the brief time the defense had to review this newly received evidence, it has found exculpatory evidence both in videos the defense has watched and the documents the defense has reviewed. While the prosecution has been holding on to this exculpatory evidence, Richard Allen has been living in hell. Lastly, the evidence will show that on the week of August 28, 2023, Professor McClelland and State Trooper Jerry Holman requested a meeting with Todd Click. By this time, the defense had taken several depositions, including Holman, Liggett, and Lesenby, and the prosecution and Delphi investigation leadership now knew for a while the defense team had been aware of Odinist evidence. At least the evidence that prosecution turned over to the defense scattered throughout multiple hard drives and many flash drives. The prosecution had learned in early August that the defense had figured out strong Odinist ties to the crimes, despite the apparent attempts of the prosecution, Liggett, and Holman to hide this exculpatory information from the defense. Wanting to allay his fears that an innocent man was sitting in Westville, Click agreed to attend the meeting with Holman, hoping he would be learning that the evidence did in fact exist, linking Richard Allen to the murders. Click's hope was dashed. Paragraph 17 of Click's affidavit. Upon directing the letter to Mr. McClelland, I heard nothing from the prosecutor's office or any other members of Unified Command until I received phone calls on August 23rd and August 25th, 2023, which involved brief discussions regarding scheduling. During these phone calls, it was requested that I meet with Trooper Holman during the week of September 4th, 2023. I was informed that law enforcement officials intended to sit down with me and discuss with me the reason why Richard Allen was responsible for these crimes. I was told that he, Jerry Holman, wanted to put my mind at ease. However, during the meeting with Detective Holman and a second detective, whose name I'm unfamiliar with, there was no discussion or offerings as to why they believed Richard Allen was guilty of the charged crimes. I believe the interview was an attempt by them to clean up their loose ends, knowing that they had given very little, if any, attention to the investigative efforts of myself, Detective Forensi, and Detective Murphy, emphasis was added, so this was not bolded. And let's see here. Oh, interesting. Robert says that Susan Hendricks said, "Tune in to Nancy Grace tonight. The victims are suing channels after a gag order is lifted." Well, I'm sure they're. Look, I can never imagine the pain of losing your girls in such a awful, terrible way. And if there are YouTubers who are going after the family, that is absolutely gross and disgusting. And I don't co-sign that. But Nancy Grace is not my favorite person. If you particularly like her, that is your jam. But I don't find her to be any sort of moral authority figure, especially when she only listens to the state. And as a lawyer, you should always listen to the defense too, even if you don't believe it, even if you think the defense is full of, horse feathers, you should at least listen to them so you can give a fulsome report to your viewers. Now, 4, not only did Carroll County Sheriff Tony Liggett fail to include all this Odinite information in his October 13th, 2022 affidavit for search warrant, and not only did McClelland and the Unified Command withhold exculpatory evidence, Liggett also concealed damaging witness statements that devastate Liggett's timeline, a timeline Liggett needs to be true in order to place Richard Allen at the trail when Libby and Abby were abducted. Additionally, Liggett lied in his affidavit about statements from other key witnesses, further devastating his timeline. 5. Richard Allen has zero connections to any pagan cult or pagan cultist. Furthermore, no forensic evidence such as DNA or electronic evidence links Richard Allen to the girls or the crime scene, i.e., he is a completely innocent man. 6. Most of the evidence backing these assertions was found scattered over no less than 10 hard drives and several flash drives provided by the prosecution, meaning that the defense is not making wild accusations, but rather primarily relaying facts and information that is backed up by the prosecutor's own discovery, even discovery that prosecution just provided to the defense as late as September 8th, 2023. 7. Not coincidentally, members, Odinists of the same pagan cult, are employed as correction officers for the Indiana Department of Corrections at Westfield Correctional Facility. It is inside of the cold concrete walls of a maximum security unit of this dilapidated, quote-unquote, reformatory that Richard Allen is being threatened, intimidated, and mentally abused. Footnote 7. Defense counsel is not saying that Westfield guards are involved in the murders, only that they were likely involved in threatening, intimidating, and mentally abusing Richard Allen. 8. Throughout this document, references are made to the Unified Command. Essentially, the Unified Command was the quote-unquote leadership of the Delphi murder investigation. According to Tony Liggett, Carroll County Sheriff and member of Unified Command when the investigation began, Unified Command consisted of law enforcement from a variety of entities, local, state, and federal. Unified Command were overseers of the entire investigative operation. According to Liggett, the members of Unified Command are or were from Carroll County, Tony Liggett and Kevin Hammond, from the state police, Jerry Holman, Jay Harper, and Dave Vito, from the FBI, Rich Davies. And there is a footnote 8. Although State Police Superintendent Doug Carter pulled the plug and kicked the FBI off the Delphi murder case around 2021 over some conflicts, according to Jerry Holman deposition pages 123 to 130. Interestingly, Tony Liggett, who was deposed before Holman, claimed under oath that Doug Carter was not involved in making decisions for the case. Liggett, I just call him Liggett. I think it's Liggett, but it's my Midwestern accent. Deposition, page 30, lines 10 through 24. Furthermore, Liggett, claimed to be unaware that the FBI was even kicked out, let alone that any agency had actually kicked out the FBI from the investigation of the Delphi case. Liggett Depot, page 64, lines 14 through 25. It is quite odd that the salient topic of Doug Carter kicking the FBI off the Delphi case would never have been discussed between Liggett and Holman, who are working so closely with one another in unified command. If that can be believed, it would be quite perplexing. English is my first and only language, and I can sometimes say it. So the FBI was kicked off of the case, and we don't know why. Was it personal animosity, or were they trying to go in a different direction and Unified Command did not approve? I also didn't know that one could kick the feds out of anything. I mean, give me that trick. I'd like to kick the feds out of a lot of things. Odinism, Odinites, and runes. Odinism is a pagan religion referenced above, and its followers are called Odinites. Odinites are enamored of Viking or Nordic culture. Evidence supports that the crime scene, these murdering Odinites left behind obvious signatures and symbols in the form of runes. 9. Merriam-Webster defines a rune as, quote, any of the characters of any several alphabets used by the Germanic peoples from the 3rd to the 13th century. You're learning all the new things. These runes were 1. Formed with sticks, 2. Fashioned with tree branches, and 3. Painted using the blood of Liberty German. Sticks and tree branches were deliberately, carefully, and proficiently placed on each girl in a certain arrangement mimicking certain runes. At least one of the branches appeared to have had its end cut cleanly off by some type of tool like an electric saw, providing proof of a preconceived plan. Additionally, the blood of Liberty German was used to paint or as paint to mark a tree with a rune that looks similar to the letter F. Footnote 10. Many runes look like the letter F, including a rune called Ansons, which, among other things, stands for Odin. With a simple Google search, these runes would be identified as one of the many calling cards of this pagan religious cult. Yet law enforcement in charge of the Delphi investigation seemingly and quickly abandoned the obvious correlation between the crime scene and Odinism, despite an obscene amount of evidence linking Odinism to the crime scene. Even in spite of powerful evidence linking specific Odinites in and around Indiana to the murder. Also, the court will learn in his affidavit for search warrant that Sheriff Liggett failed to inform Judge Diener that absolutely nothing links Richard Allen to Odinism or any religious cult. So, footnote 11, this comes from Liggett's deposition, page 80, lines 14 through 23. So when I say that this all comes from discovery, this all comes from depositions that were given by people that worked with Unified Command, this is what is coming from them. They are not pulling things out of thin air. They are not, kind of squinting and looking to the side. They have footnotes and they have the receipts. Also, no forensics, such as DNA, no electronic data extracted from his computers or phones or from his social media links Richard Allen to the crime scene. Additionally, nothing links Richard Allen to any of the Odinite suspects. The same Odinite suspects the evidence strongly supports sacrifice Libby and Abby in some sort of pagan ritual. Richard Allen had nothing to do with this crime, but is rather an innocent man, a patsy for the police, arrested 26 days before an election. Now, that timeline is really interesting. Again, you have the federal lawsuit for unfair discrimination in a workplace from an officer in Carroll County who claimed that he was being discriminated against because, among other reasons, he disagreed with leadership as to the investigation of a high-profile murder case. Well, Carroll County's high-profile murder case is this particular case. And His arrest did come 26 days before an election in which the general consensus was that they were not doing enough to find the, person who did this to Libby and Abby. Failure to pursue Odinist links. Law enforcement's failure to actively pursue the obvious links between the crime scene and Odinism is confounding. It's even more confounding when days and weeks after the murders, a particular Odinite from Logansport named Brad Holder posted on social media images mimicking the very runes found at the crime scene, a crime scene unreleased and unknown to the general public even to this day. Who was Brad Holder? He was an Odinite whose son, Logan, had been dating Abby. Brad Holder's social media posts seemingly taunt the very police that refuse to fully investigate him. The defense believes that the court will be shocked at the number of clues, or quote unquote Easter eggs, both before and after the murders that Holder openly posted on his Facebook page that pointed the finger to his involvement in the murders. However, a fact that is simply mind-blowing to the defense is that Brad Holder was never considered a suspect in the murders of Abby and Libby. State Trooper Jerry Holman, one of law enforcement officers in charge of organizing and investigating the Delphi murders, claimed in his August 10th, 2023 deposition that Brad Holder was not really ever a suspect. Footnote 12. This comes from Holman's deposition, page 172, lines 4 and 5. Police reports written near the time of the murders revealed that Jerry Holman is telling the truth. Brad Holder was cleared as a suspect quickly on March 16, 2017. On March 1st, 2017, Tony Liggett stated in a report that there were no leads required concerning Brad Holder, meaning that it was not necessary for law enforcement to continue looking for leads related to Brad Holder. Liggett made the decision a mere 15 days after the girls were murdered. By March 16, 2023, Unified Command member Kevin Hammond wrote that, quote, Brad Holder has been cleared, end quote. The girls had not been dead for 30 days, and Unified Command had already cleared Brad Holder as a suspect. Unified Command had already cleared Holder as a suspect within 30 days, knowing that Brad Holder's son dated Abby. Unified Command had already cleared Holder as a suspect within 30 days of the murder, although a simple review of Brad Holder's Facebook page would show that Brad Holder, was a proud Odinite that had an absolute obsession and fascination with runes. Police knew or had to know that runes had been left at the crime scene. Additionally, Unified Command had already cleared Holder as a suspect in spite of the fact that runes found on Brad Holder's Facebook pages mimicked runes found at the crime scene and had not been released to the public. The investigation had barely begun, but Unified Command had already cleared the very man that any person with even a small amount of common sense or curiosity would believe was a strong candidate for being involved in the murder of the girls. For example, the court will also learn that Unified Command was aware of a very disturbing image on Brad Holder's social media accounts that actually mimicked the crime scene. On April 12, 2007, Trooper Joseph Ryan Winters received a phone call from a man in Georgia named Ryan Boucher who had discovered disturbing images in Brad Holder's social media account. Having somehow learned that Brad Holder's son Logan had dated Abby Williams, Mr. Boucher was reviewing Brad Holder's social media history. One of the images Boucher viewed on Brad Holder's social media account was an image of two women, either dead or posed as if they were dead, on the ground on what appeared to be a forest. Both women had tree limbs and sticks arranged on their bodies. One of the women had her arm stretched out above her head, similar to the way that Libby's arm was stretched above her head. Both women were clothed, and the stick and branch formations on the girls was different to the stick and branch formations on Abby and Libby, but otherwise it bore a very eerie similarity to the crime scene in Delphi. Ryan Boucher had no knowledge of the actual crime scene. However, After reviewing Brad Holder's social media sites, Boucher was disturbed at that image as well as other images that provided insight into Brad Holder's fascination with runes. Believing that the disturbing images may be something of interest to those investigating the Delphi murders, Mr. Boucher contacted Toby Lesenby, who at the time was the sheriff of Carroll County. Lesenby quickly rebuffed Boucher, telling Boucher that Holder was not a suspect. Undeterred, Mr. Boucher contacted state police, where he ended up talking to Trooper Joseph Brian Winters. After their conversation, Winters memorialized the interaction and placed the images provided by Boucher into a Dropbox account. After creating the report, Winters then discussed his findings face to face with Jerry Holman of Unified Command. The body of this memorandum will provide details of that interaction. In his report, Winters requested law enforcement to re interview Brad Holder. The defense does not believe Unified Command ever followed up on Winters' request. It should be noted that the disturbing images found by Boucher in Georgia and placed in the Dropbox by Winters were not and still not have not been provided to the defense. In his recent deposition, Winters said he had attempted to locate the images but was unable. However, because of the potential importance of those images to Richard Allen's case, the defense team located Boucher and traveled to Georgia to meet with him. Those images are now in the possession of Richard Allen's defense team, who then provided those images to law enforcement. Again, these were important images that law enforcement failed to turn over to the defense. Instead, the defense located these images in Georgia, then turned them over to the very people who had been obligated to provide them to the defense. Unified Command, which included Tony Liggett, who drafted the affidavit for search warrant, was fully aware of the mimic crime scene on Brad Holder's social media, as well as other posts that mimicked the exact runes found at the crime scene, but failed to do anything about it, and failed to inform Judge Diner of his obvious suspect, this obvious suspect, Brad Holder, and all the evidence that existed against Holder, making him a prime suspect. The court will learn in the body of this memorandum that Holder was connected to the crimes, the crime scene, and to other men who confessed to the crime. The evidence of those connections will be provided in the body of the memorandum, including copies of images found on Holder's Facebook page at the time of the investigation, which link Holder to the crime scene, as well as the images found by Ryan Boucher that law enforcement failed to turn over to the defense. The defense will also attach what the defense calls the quote-unquote Winters report, which is a memorialization of Trooper Winters' interaction with Ryan Boucher. Liggett provided none of this evidence or information to Judge Diner, but rather Judge Diner allowed him to believe that Richard Allen was a lone suspect in the murders, in spite of zero evidence linking Richard Allen to the crimes at the time Liggett sought a search warrant 26 days before an election. Unified Command's failure to vigorously pursue the obvious links between the crime scene and Odinism is even more perplexing when evidence known to law enforcement demonstrated a clear nexus between Brad Holder and at least 4 other suspects: Elvis Fields from Rushville, Patrick Westfall from Delphi, Johnny Messer from Rushville, and Rod Abrams from Rushville, now living in Connorsville. Unified Command was aware that Elvis Fields confessed to his sister that he, Elvis, was involved in the murders, even providing to his sister intimate crime scene details, of which only those present at the crime scene would have familiarity. Additionally, Elvis Fields told his sister Mary on February 14, 2017, that he was present at the killings and that he, Elvis, now had a quote-unquote brother and was now part of a quote-unquote gang. In February 2018, Elvis had been questioned by law enforcement but denied involvement in the murders. However, after being dropped off at his trailer following the questioning, Elvis turned around, walked back to the police car, and, according to the police report, asked the state trooper if Elvis's spit, is found on one of the girls, but he could explain it away, would he still be in trouble? The state trooper that heard Elvis utter these words, Kevin Murphy, was not part of Unified Command, but immediately relayed Elvis's disturbing question to Jay Harper of Unified Command. Elvis also admitted to a different sister, Joyce, that he had spit on one of the girls. Elvis told Joyce that Elvis, was on the trail and a bridge with two girls that were killed, and he was going away for a long time. Elvis's alibi for February 13th, 2017 is also probably flawed. State troopers who weren't part of Unified Command determined that Elvis's roommate concocted a story concerning Elvis's whereabouts on February 13th, 2017. This roommate is named Rod Abrams. Abrams told a story claiming on February 13th, 2017, that Rod Abrams, Elvis Fields, and a man named Ned Smith were visiting a sick friend in Muncie. Unfortunately for Rod Abrams, this story conflicted with the story that Elvis Fields told law enforcement as to Elvis's whereabouts on February 13th, 2017. These shady alibis were relayed to Unified Command. These shady alibis will be further explained in the body of the memorandum. Furthermore, Unified Command knew that on February 1st, 2018, Elvis's sister passed a polygraph examination when asked if she was telling the truth about what Elvis had confessed to her. Unified Command's failure to vigorously pursue the obvious links between the crime scene and Odinism is even more inexplicable when evidence known to law enforcement included information about another Odinite named Patrick Westfall, who was living in Delphi very close to the murder scene on February 13th, 2017. Oh, good Lord. Jedi just sent it to me, and I have to go look over it, and I can only imagine what crazy concoction she has for us. Oh, good Lord. That woman. Evidence known to Unified Command included the facts that fellow Odinites Patrick Westfall and Brad Holder were close friends as late as January 21st, 2017. However, that friendship ended very abruptly in February 2017. The schism in their friendship resulted from a fight that occurred between Holder and Westfall in February 2017, where Holder, and Westfall were in the woods near a river conducting a ritual. One of them said or did something that the other did not agree with, and they no longer talked to each other. The river was near Patrick's house. An intoxicated Brad Holder shared this disturbing information with his ex-wife Amber Holder. Amber Holder then relayed this disturbing information to law enforcement who were not part of Unified Command in 2019. These officers then relayed this disturbing information to Unified Command. Liggett concealed this information from Judge Diner. So Judge Diner was the sitting judge when it was the probable cause affidavit and the arrest warrant, search warrant. So he recused himself shortly after Richard Allen was arrested, citing fear because of general media demands for access and threats, he was saying, from the general public for information. In 2019, Unified Command learned in a totally different conversation with his ex-wife, Brad Holder pointed the finger away from himself and directly at Patrick Westfall as being the person actually responsible for the murders of Abby and Libby. According to police reports, Brad Holder told his ex-wife, Amber Holder, that, quote, Westfall and his people killed Abigail Williams and Liberty German because one of their mothers was mixing with other people outside the mother's race, end quote. Furthermore, Unified Command was aware that Brad Holder had told Amber that, quote, I can only protect you so much if you keep asking questions, end quote. Brad Holder further told his ex-wife Amber that Patrick Westfall had many people backing him, Westfall up, and that Westfall also had powerful friends, quotation marks. Liggett knew of this information for more than 3 years before Liggett sought a search warrant for Richard Allen's house. Yet Liggett never shared that information with Judge Diner. Well, the Odinist sect that this is deeply rooted in white supremacy. Again, when we move to see pictures of Holder and Westfall, it's never like the best specimens of caucasity. I speak as a pale one myself. It's never, like some 6'7" Henry Cavill kinda thing. I'm just saying, it's always the one guy with, like, 2 lazy eyes and flippers, but that's just my general outlook on the situation. Additionally, Westphal provided a very weak alibi as to his whereabouts on February 13th, 2017. Westphal told law enforcement that he, Westphal, was at home on the afternoon of Monday, February 13th, 2017. The defense is unaware of any search warrant that Liggett sought to enter Westfall's home, or whether Unified Command instructed law enforcement to knock on a single door to verify what Westville's alibi. Unified Command's failure to continually pursue the obvious links between the crime scene and Odinism is even more disturbing when evidence known to law enforcement include information about another Odinite named Johnny Messer from Rushville. Johnny was a recruiter for the Odinites, and as well as the connective tissue between the Odinites from the Delphi area, Brad Holder and Patrick Westphal, and the suspects from the Rushville area, Elvis Fields and Rod Abrams. Delphi is located 126 miles from Rushville. Law enforcement knew that Johnny Messer was friends with Brad Holder and Patrick Westphal. Law enforcement also knew that Messer was acquaintances with Elvis Fields and Rod Abrams. Unified Command theoretically could claim, and actually appear to be claiming, that this connection is simply a bizarre coincidence. However, Unified Command not only knew that Elvis Fields slash Rod Abrams and Patrick Holder, or Brad Holder, Patrick Westphal, daggone it, shared a common acquaintance, Johnny Messer, but also that Elvis Fields and Brad Holder followed each other on Facebook and even mimicked each other's Facebook pages, with Elvis Field actually recreating the photos that Holder posted on Holder's Facebook page. Shockingly, at his August 10th, 2023 deposition, Unified Command member Jerry Holman claimed that he did not even know who Johnny Messer was, nor what evidence showed of Messer's possible role in the murders of Abby and Libby. It's additionally infuriating that Johnny Messer was cleared as a suspect in the murders when considering these facts. Johnny's ex-girlfriend, Taylor Hornaday, told police that Johnny Messer and Patrick Westphal were like brothers. She told the police that she allowed Johnny to borrow her car on or around Valentine's Day 2017. So that's the year that this happened. And that Johnny drove her car up there to hang out with his friends or his Vinlander friends, 13. Vinlander is a word interchangeable with those that practice Odinism. As State Trooper Roland Purdy stated in his deposition, all members of Vinlanders are also Odinists. Purdy, deposition, page 104, lines 1 through 25. Basically, the Vinlanders are a white supremacist group consisting of Odinists. Brad Holder, Patrick Westphal, and Johnny Messer are all affiliated with the Vinlander group. Johnny Messer's ex-girlfriend, Taylor Hornaday, also confirmed that all Vinlanders are also Odinist, and that Johnny Messer, Brad Holder, and Patrick Westphal were all members of Vinlander. So now they have a car. These people have a car and not really great alibis. When he returned her vehicle, it had dried blood over one side of it. Johnny Messer refused to discuss details of how the blood got there. Johnny Messer's ex-girlfriend further stated it took several car washes to finally remove the blood. Meanwhile, Messer has claimed he had never once, not in his life, been to Delphi, home of his brother, Patrick Westfall, and near the home of his other Odinite brother, Patrick Holder. Messer's ex-girlfriend also told law enforcement that Brad Holder and Johnny Messer were two of the most violent people she knew and were fully capable of having been involved in the murders. Johnny Messer's ex-girlfriend further stated that the motive for their involvement in the murder of Abby and Libby might be the concept of, quote, blood in, blood out, end quote, which means social acceptance into their secret circles. All this information was relayed to Liggett and the Unified Command team, yet Unified Command provided no guidance as to what to do to capitalize on this information in order to work towards solving the murders. Additionally, Unified Command learned that Johnny Messer's ex-girlfriend had been listening to and recording Johnny Messer's phone calls. Police secured the phone and listened to 3 phone calls involving Johnny Messer. In 2 of the phone calls, Messer was, quote, offering money to other people to find someone that they could be injured or unalived. The 3rd call involves Messer, quote, bragging about holding a subject hostage and shooting them in his house, end quote. Essentially, Unified Command said nothing to see here regarding Johnny Messer and issued no search warrants for his home, none that have been disclosed to the defense, nor did they attempt to utilize the age-old investigative tool referred to as a quote-unquote interrogation. The snark. The snark, I love it. To pursue the truth about the involvement of Johnny Messer, Brad Holder, or Patrick Westfall in these crimes. You guys, this is just the introduction. This is 136 pages of this is your discovery, this is what we found, why the hell didn't you do anything about it? Many more shocking facts concerning this so-called investigation will be revealed in the body of the memorandum. Odinites in Westville Correctional Facility, quote-unquote, guarding Richard Allen. The evidence shows that during his pretrial incarceration at Westville Correctional Facility, Richard Allen has been monitored, intimidated, and mentally abused by correctional officers who are also members of the Odinite cult. 2 of those correctional officers are named Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones. These Westville correctional officers boldly wore patches on their Department of Corrections DOC uniforms that proclaimed, "In Odin we trust," along with another patch displaying symbols of Odinism interlocking triangles. Both Odinite correctional officers, Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones, also displayed images of runes or other Odinite symbols on their Facebook pages. As recently as June 25th, 2023, for example, Odinite Sergeant Robinson openly displayed a photograph of his Odinite altar on his Facebook page. A similar altar can be found on the Facebook page of Brad Holder. Beginning at least on April 3rd, 2023, Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Robinson wore their Odinite patches when the defense team visited Richard Allen. However, Sergeant Robinson's and Sergeant Jones's brazen display of their Odinite patches came to an end on August 17th, 2023. What changed? Why did they suddenly no longer display their Odinite patches beginning on the August 17th, 2023 visit between Richard Allen and his defense team? Here's your probable answer. It was not until August 10th, 2023 deposition of Trooper Jerry Holman that Richard Allen's defense team finally revealed to the prosecutor and to Unified Command that for many months they, Richard Allen's defense team, had been fully aware of the strong evidence linking Odinism to the murders. It was also at the August 10th, 2023 deposition of Unified Command that They learned that Richard Allen's defense team was not only aware of the information, but also intended to expose the linkage of Abby and Libby's murders to Odinism and would also be revealing the names of Odinists at trial. At that deposition, Holman and the prosecutor also learned that the defense team obviously intended on exposing the Unified Command's utter failure in pursuing the Odinist suspects. In spite of powerful evidence of Odinite involvement in the murder. However, and it's important to note, at his August 10th, 2023 deposition, Richard's defense team did not underline, tell Holman or anyone else know that the defense team was fully aware of Odinite corrections officers at Westville wearing, quote, "In Odin we trust" patches. Richard Allen's defense team's next visit with Richard Allen at Westfield following the August 10th, 2023 deposition occurred 1 week later on August 17th, 2023. Curiously, or perhaps not so curiously, in those 7 days since the defense team revealed their knowledge that evidence linked Odinist to the murder for the first time, Sergeant Robinson was no longer wearing his Odin patch. Footnote 14. Sergeant Jones was not present at this visit. It's almost as if someone had alerted Odinite Robinson that the gig was up because the lawyer knew about the links to Odinism. So lose the patch and pray the defense attorney never noticed the patches on prior visits. Unfortunately for Westville and Unified Command, Rick's defense team absolutely noticed the Odinite patches worn by Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones beginning in April 3rd, 2023. Furthermore, Rick's defense team absolutely noticed the conspicuous absence of Sergeant Robinson's Odinist patches following Trooper Holman's realization that Rick's defense team was fully aware of the connection between the murders and Odinism, as well as the failure of Unified Command to follow through on evidence that linked the murders to Odinism. This court will also learn in the body of this memorandum that Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Robinson were seemingly always by Richard Allen's side during most, if not every, visit. Normally, corrections officers, usually Sergeant Robinson or Sergeant Jones, were within earshot of every conversation between Richard and his attorneys, between Richard and his wife, close enough that Richard would be worried about any conversation with his attorneys and with his wife being overheard by Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones or other corrections officers. Beginning on April 3rd, 2023, and for several visits thereafter, the Westville correctional officers even videotaped attorney visits between Richards and his defense team. Most of the time, if not every time, it was Sergeant Jones or Sergeant Robinson bringing a handheld camcorder to the visit. Corrections officers even required that Richard Allen be positioned facing the window where the corrections officer was videotaping the attorney visits with a handheld camcorder. This positioning of Richard Allen's body was to allow corrections officers to videotape Richard Allen's mouth as he talked to his attorneys. Richard would therefore not be able to privately discuss anything with his attorneys, such as, quote, "The guards are telling me that my wife and family will be killed unless I call my wife and tell her I killed those girls." Footnote 15. To be clear, up to this point, Richard Allen has never spoken these words to his attorneys. The point is that the Westville guards have made the privacy needed for Richard to have the type of private conversation with his attorneys difficult, and perhaps not worth the risk if you're Richard Allen. Court of Common Opinion. So this dingleberry who possibly wears sheets and has the crystal mouth. Weber refers to cops by their first name, gets caught lying on the stand, impeached multiple times, and this cop buddy is the centerpiece of this zero evidence prosecution. Pretty much. That's why I decided to take some time this week to reread the Franks motion. I know I have videos, but I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat in case you guys have any questions. It's a little harder to read and look at chat. But this is all information. This didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, guys, if I thought this was a bunch of bologna sausage, I would tell you, because personally, I don't like being lied to, and I don't like, telling people, absolute random BS on my channel. But all of these assertions, all of these assertions come from the discovery that the prosecution handed over. And they had all this evidence. Why didn't they check on anything? It really is just the saddest investigation I have ever seen. And this was all denied by Judge Gull. They will not be allowed to bring this in. They can somewhat allude to it, but the judge doesn't think that the door has been opened to invite third party guilt speculation. And if anything, this will be the thing that overpeals or repeals the case. The fact that he was denied with having this much information from solid sources, a chance to show third party, involvement, this choice is going to be the thing that an appellate attorney just, eats up. On one such meeting with his attorney, or I'm sorry, there we go. Instead, a mentally defeated Richard Allen would continually mutter to his defense team at every visit these types of general questions. Quote, is my wife alive? Is my family alive? Is my wife alive? Is my family safe? End quote. At one such meeting with his attorneys, Richard Allen mumbled in a somewhat incoherent fashion that Odinites were threatening him. It would be important to know that Richard Allen's defense team had never mentioned the word Odinites or Odinism or informed Richard Allen that evidence suggests that Odinist murdered Abby and Libby until August 25th, 2023, when his defense team, in the presence of his wife, who was visiting with Rick at the prison, first discovered the exculpatory Odinist related evidence, or first discovered the exculpatory Odin related evidence to Rick. Rick's defense team felt that having him remain unaware would hopefully keep Rick in a bit safer. Due to Rick's weakened mental state and the concern that he might unwittingly discuss his attorney's strategies to Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Robinson, Rick's attorneys opted not to discuss Odinism with their client out of fear that Sergeant Robinson or Sergeant Jones would then be alert that Richard Allen's defense team was aware of the Odinite involvement. Richard's defense team needed additional time to investigate and review evidence before feeling confident and comfortable in revealing their knowledge to the court of strong evidence that Odinites murdered the girls and that Unified Command has chosen to do nothing about it, but in fact had hidden these facts from Judge Diner. Therefore, Richard's defense team opted to keep Richard in the dark about the Odinite connection to the murders supported by the evidence. Footnote 16. This decision has been painful and emotionally difficult for Richard Allen's defense team, as defense counsel recognized that while the defense took the necessary time to review the discovery to establish Odinist links both to the murder and to Westville Correctional Facility, defense counsel was also aware that Rick would remain in his hellhole at Westville, subject to the cruelty of Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Robinson, and perhaps other Odinite correctional officers. This was especially painful at the June 15th, 2023 hearing to transport Rick to Cass County, as defense counsel knew at the time of the links between the murders and Odinism and Westville. Unfortunately, defense counsel needed additional time to fully understand and verify the facts before leveling such accusations. This is the reason that the defense tactically decided to keep its knowledge to itself rather than reveal knowledge in open court at the hearing. Unified Command and the prosecution's hiding of exculpatory evidence is even more angering because difficult strategic decisions could have been avoided had McClelland offered the exculpatory documents sooner. Perhaps then Rick could have filed for a speedy trial or would have been removed from Westville as the defense would have been able to more fully inform the court about the facts of the case. Jennifer Underwood, I think this has gotten a lot of attention because at the bottom of it, at the very bottom of this, and it's interesting that this has brought such worldwide attention given that these girls aren't from a political or known family. I hope the truth is found and the right person is prosecuted. I think it's for exactly that reason that this has gained popularity. Had it been a rich or famous person, you can kind of distance yourself like, well, everyone knows who they are. Maybe they were targeted because of this. Because these are just two little girls from a small town in Indiana, it really drives home that deep, dark fear in every parent's heart that there are monsters in this world coming for your children. And you don't have to be rich. You don't have to be famous. You don't have an Instagram. They could be simply walking, hiking, enjoying a lovely, unseasonably warm day. And they are ripped in the most violent, degrading way from this earth. And I really think that that is what has spoken, at least to me, that deep, dark fear that every parent has. But it also, I think, does help that they're just two normal girls. It juxtaposes the terror and the horror of this crime so perfectly with these two very innocent girls, regardless of where they came from. Again, more detailed information concerning Odinite correctional officers, as well as documentation supporting that information, will be provided in the body of this memoranda. Uh, Liggett concealed certain witness testimony and falsified other witness testimony in order to prevent Liggett's bogus timeline from being exposed to Judge Diner. Beyond the shocking omissions concerning the pagan cults linked to the murders and the fact that Odinists were also watching Richard Allen akin to foxes watching the hen house, the evidence will show that Liggett's affidavit for search warrant is also filled with lies and other concealed information concerning witness testimony. This false and concealed information completely eviscerates the state's timeline. The evidence will show that Tony Liggett knew of major problems that the witness's testimony created, and Liggett chose to solve his problem by concealing information and even falsifying other information in order to bolster the state's bogus timeline. The evidence will show that Liggett concealed facts concerning descriptions that key witness Betsy Blair made directly to Liggett face to face in 2019 concerning one, the person that she, Betsy Blair, observed on the bridge, and two, a vehicle she, Betsy Blair, observed at the CPS parking lot at around 2:15 p.m. For Liggett's timeline to work and to place Richard Allen on the Monon High Bridge at 2:13, the time of the infamous quote unquote down the hill video, Liggett desperately needed Betsy Blair to describe a man on a bridge that looked like Richard Allen, and furthermore desperately needed Betsy Blair to describe a car that she observed at the CPS parking lot at approximately 2:15 p.m. as looking like Richard Allen's black Ford Focus. Suffice it to say, the evidence will show that Liggett concealed from Judge Diner that Betsy Blair described a man on the bridge looking nothing like Richard Allen and described a car at the CPS lot that looked nothing like Richard Allen's car, both in design and color. Evidence will show that Betsy provided these timeline defeating descriptions directly to Liggett face to face 2 times in 2019. Yet, Liggett failed to inform Judge Diner of these descriptions, as well as inform Diner of the fatal flaw that these missing descriptions provided for the timeline. Yeah, don't trip, Dick. Allegedly, it's a drug secret society white power type thing, which makes sense for when the first judge quit for safety and security reasons. The only thing that makes that a little weird is that one of the prosecuting attorneys is Judge Diner's daughter. So it would seem that if he knew these kind of, backroom dealings were going on, he would want his daughter to have nothing to do with it. unless, of course, she is trying to get Richard Allen, in jail for this, so maybe she's safe. I don't know, it is a weird coincidence and a bit Indiana's a bit weird. We're all a bit weird. The evidence will also show that Liggett just flat out lied about what Liggett, claimed Sarah Carball told him in 2017 concerning a man walking down the road near the crime scene. For Liggett's timeline to work, Liggett needed Sarah Carball to describe a man walking down the road wearing a blue jacket who had blood covering his clothing. However, in 2017, Sarah did not say these things. This did not prevent Liggett from affirming under oath that Sarah Carball did say those things. In fact, what Sarah Carball actually told Liggett in 2017 was that she, Carball, observed a man walking down the road wearing a tan coat, whose clothes were muddy. Nowhere did Carball claim in 2017 that the man she observed was wearing a blue coat. Nowhere did Carball claim in 2017 that the man she observed was also wearing bloody clothing. Nowhere, nowhere. This is the truth about what Sarah Carball actually told Liggett in 2017 blows up Liggett's timeline, which is the likely reason that Liggett failed to include this information in the affidavit. Thank you so much, Julie O, for the super chat. And that's fine. I know that people have really strong opinions on both sides. And thank you so much. On replay, catch up 2 times, just saying thank you for covering this travesty of justice. I hate Judge Goal the more coverage I watch. It is unexplainable as to how heavy-handed Judge Goal has been on this particular case, unless, of course, there is something to be said about fear of retribution. That being said, there are so many holes in this case, and it makes me so incredibly heartbroken that regardless of if an investigation can be reopened, there has been so much lost time. People pass away, people, move away, people forget things. And I want justice for these little girls. It's just heartbreaking. The defense believes that the evidence strongly supports the contention that Liggett intentionally concealed evidence from Judge Diner and lied about other evidence to Judge Diner in his affidavit for a search warrant. So, another functionality of a Frank's motion is to basically call the police a bunch of dirty, rotten, no good liars. Now, you want to be careful with this because obviously the police do not like you calling them dirty, rotten, no good liars without a basis in, factuality. So this is going to attack Leggett's probable cause affidavit just as much as it attacks the entire case against Richard Allen, because they need to prove to the court before they can even get a hearing that, yes, it does look like the police either purposely omitted or, inadvertently nincompooped certain things on the probable cause affidavit. So this probably opened up, Judge Goal's can of righteous indignation whenever the state is, demeaned in any way or brought up and said, "Hey, explain this." Judge Goal is definitely in the pocket or definitely more prosecutorial leaning. I don't want to, you know, so this attack on the police officers and everything else probably just stirred her hate fire for the defense. The court of public opinion, Judge Diner held a safekeeping hearing without granting Rick a lawyer for it, sent Rick to a torture, maximum prison. His daughter prosecutor has a conflict of interest. Her daddy is going to be sued. Yeah, but it's Carroll County. Is anything actually going to happen? The defense believes that the evidence strongly supports the contention that Liggett intentionally concealed evidence from Judge Diner and lied about other evidence to Judge Diner in his affidavit for search warrant. However, if Liggett had not intentionally concealed evidence from the judge, nor did not intentionally place false information into the search warrant affidavit, at a minimum, Liggett behaved recklessly when he prepared the affidavit, omitting those facts from Judge Diner and providing false information in the affidavit. As stated in the motions accompanying this brief, the defense must show that Liggett either intentionally or recklessly omitted facts from the affidavit or provided false statements in the affidavit. Evidence supporting these facts were needles in a giant haystack of discovery. To conclude the introductory portion of this memorandum, the defense would tell the court that the evidence supporting the assertions, contained through this memorandum were buried deep in a mountain of discovery, thousands upon thousands of pages of paperwork and hundreds of hours of videos, but not buried deep enough. The court will know at the conclusion of this memorandum that the defense is not inventing, fabricating, or exaggerating these facts, no matter how crazy the facts appear. Richard Allen's defense team is attaching to this memorandum the supporting documentation that provides proof that these facts are true. This memorandum will consist of 5 parts. Part 1 will be a description of the crime scene. This description will provide important and necessary context that will allow understanding for the rest of the memorandum and will allow provide insight into the preposterous claim by Sheriff Liggett that one and only one person was responsible for these murders. This will be important as Sheriff must claim that Richard Allen acted alone in order to dispel the massive evidentiary foundation that supports the likelihood that the pre-planned abduction and ritualistic murder of Abby and Libby required multiple Odinites in order to succeed. Part 2 will detail the evidence that connects the Odinites to the murders. Tony Liggett concealed this evidence from Judge Diner when Liggett prepared and signed under oath his affidavit for a search warrant. This section is long and detailed and factually dense, especially for those not living and breathing this case. At the beginning of Section 2, Defense Counsel has provided a Delphi murder infographic, a variable visual representation of the major parties mentioned in this memorandum, as well as a list of names and the relevance of those names found in the memorandum. These documents were offered as a reference tool for the assistance in unpacking these dense facts. Part 3 will detail the information that confirms that Tony Liggett concealed evidence in his search warrant affidavit concerning statements of Betsy Blair and fabricated statements in his search warrant affidavit concerning Sarah Carbaugh. Part 4 will consist of evidence that Odinite correction officers and leaderships have been positioned to watch, guard, intimidate Richard Allen since at least early April 2023. This section will also provide images of the patches worn by Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones, as well as images taken from their Facebook pages. Part 5 will include information concerning how Richard Allen became a patsy in this investigation 26 days before an election. This section will include information that Liggett failed to provide in his search warrant affidavit concerning the trustworthiness of Dan Doolin's so-called report. Part 5 will also address the complete lack of evidence that linked Richard Allen to the murders, including an analysis of weak evidence that Liggett relied on his affidavit as Liggett, attempted to persuade Judge Diner that evidence of the murders would be found in Richard Allen's home. Now, I do want to kind of warn you guys, this first section is going to go very detailed into kind of the physicality needed to get this scene set up. And it's not graphic, and they use language to shock you, but it does involve the death of 2 little girls. So, if this might be too much for you, if you follow the case, but this might be too much, I understand. I have kiddos myself. Um, I would suggest, skipping through this, being on the replay crew and skipping through this, for a little bit until, it comes back, because this is a little bit dense. I think it'll probably take me about 45 minutes to read. And thank you. I pretended to know what I do with makeup today. So, honestly, protect your mental health. This is, I don't want anyone to ever, uh hurt their mental health, just give me a click or a like or screen time. You guys can guard your mental health better than I can. So if you need to be on the replay crew so you can fast forward through this, no problem. And absolutely don't trip dick. This has been just a harrowing case to watch go through with the scant evidence because I was really excited when they caught Richard Allen. I thought, thank flippin' goodness, although I didn't say flippin'. They caught the guy, they caught the monster. I thought maybe this was going to be like John Benet Ramsey or, the West Memphis 3. I thought this was going to be never solved, and I was so excited, and then I read the probable cause affidavit, and I was like, "Well, maybe they have more." But then the Franks memo dropped, and I was like, "They had jack diddly crap." Part 1, the crime scene. When members of a search party found the girls in the late morning of February 14th, 2017. Thank you, Haktua. Sort of. I've been trying to do stuff, but fall weather is kicking my butt. So I'm trying to eat less like an enraged, drunken toddler. Um, you know, Sugar is not a food group. So I'm trying to be a little better on, my food group choices, although I still contend Reese Cup is a food group. It's got your chocolate and your protein and your sugar. When members of a search party found the girls in the late morning of February 14th, 2017, Abby and Libby had been missing for approximately 22 hours. The scene was ghoulish. Libby was found at the base of a tree with 4 tree branches of various sizes placed intentionally in a very specific and arranged pattern on her naked body. Libby was positioned flat on her back with her left arm stretched over her head, touching the base of a large tree. Libby's right hand was covered in blood. Libby's left hand was covered in blood. Blood spot and blood drippings were seen all over Libby's body from head to toe. Libby's right arm was placed alongside her body. One large tree branch had been placed over her left shoulder. Let me see if I can pull up the infographic, that alternate juror. Because that one is just kind of a black and white. But this'll give you an idea of what we're looking at. So, oh, I don't wanna choose Reddit. No one wants to choose Reddit. This is what the sticks look like. Now, obviously, the state has contended, and it's up for the jury to decide whether this was actual placement of, what was going on. If this was an undoing is typically when, an unliver tries to give dignity back to the decedent and will close their eyes or cover them, or if they're nude, cover their bodies. And welcome, raiders. Welcome, welcome. So these are the formation of the sticks as they were at the, um, murder scene. Liberty was completely nude, uh, and Abby was in some of Liberty's clothes. It looks like she had been dressed or been made to dress in clothes that were not her own. This does go to the theory that the main target for denigration, for disrespect, for, just altogether sort of horrible behavior was Libby. Libby was not washed. Libby was not reclothed. Libby was not, put in a dignified manner. And I'm sorry, but these are the placement of the sticks. You can argue to me until you're blue in the face that this is, part of covering up, but these were not thick branches. This was not, they were not also covered with detritus, which would have been really available during, the February in, Indiana. You have all sorts of leaf detritus and everything else. Thank you, Fox Raiders. Welcome. I'm probably going to go another hour. I do want to give you a warning that we are going over the crime scene portion of the Frank's memo. And while it doesn't get into graphic and lurid language, it's still involving the death of little girls. And, I protect your mental health. You can always join on Replay Crew and, fast forward through this particular section. While it does go physicality needed to make this crime scene, it it's not lurid, it's not graphic, but protect your mental health. It absolutely is a heartbreaking scene, and my heart goes out to the families, you know oh, crud. I stopped sharing instead of present. I am so proud of myself some days. All right. So that's kind of how the girls were positioned, and you have to remember that Liberty was covered in blood and left nude, and, Abby was put in some of Liberty's clothes. Libby's right arm was placed alongside her body. One large tree branch had been placed on her left shoulder. This branch was so long that it extended above Libby's head several feet, and below her legs for several feet as well. Two smaller branches formed a V where her legs joined to her body near her private area, with both sides of the V extending upward toward Libby's head. One branch extending to the left of Libby's head and one to the right of Libby's head. The last four branches extended along Libby's body on a line from her shoulder to her left shoulder. This fourth tree branch also connected with other tree branches and was placed under both branches that formed the V. Liberty's neck was sliced and partially covered by this fourth branch. There appeared to be no blood sprayed or dripped onto the leaves or the tree near Libby's head and the sliced neck. It appeared likely that Libby had been killed in a nearby tree and then dragged to her final resting place. Now, the problem with the dragging is that there were no drag marks in any of the crime scene footage. And it is nearly impossible for, Richard Allen, I think he's 5'4", 200 pounds, to lift and this is not body shaming, I just got out of the 200 club, but Liberty German was 200 pounds, and ostensibly she would have been passed away. So he would have had to deadlift carry her to place her with a downward leading tilt to her head so that the blood would make run tracks this way. I'm not saying it's impossible. I just don't know that Richard Allen does strong men on the weekends. It appears likely that Liberty was killed at a nearby tree, then dragged to her final resting place, where she was then positioned before having the tree limbs placed on her in this very specific pattern. The murders treated Abby very differently. Abby was found just a few feet away from Liberty. Her body was not placed parallel to Libby, but rather at an angle, with Abby's legs just a few feet from Libby's legs. However, both of their heads were found a few feet further apart from each other. Significant differences existed between how Libby's body was found and how Abby's body was found. Abby was not found at a base of the tree. Abby was fully clothed. In fact, Abby was dressed in Liberty's sweatshirt and jeans. No blood appeared on Abby's clothing, meaning that she was likely murdered while nude and then dressed by the murderers after she had expired and after the blood had stopped flowing from her neck. Abby's hands were clean, no blood, and Abby's feet were clean, no blood. Other than blood found around Abby's neck area where the murderers had inflicted the fatal wound, very little, if any, blood was found anywhere else on Abby's body or clothing. The juxtaposition of the spots and streaks of blood found all over Libby's body with the lack of blood on Abby's body, undergarments, overgarments is stark. The murderers appear to have gone to great lengths to keep Abby's body and clothing clean from blood. Abby was found on her back like Libby. However, unlike Libby, Abby's elbows were bent with her right and left arms both placed on her chest. So, kind of, the old funeral pose, if you will. Or at least when my brothers and I would play funeral, because, I mean, it's Mo. What did you expect us to play? That's how you would put your hands. Abby's left hand and arm near the left side of her face, and her right arm and near the right side of her face. Also, Abby's left leg was straight while her right leg was bent at the knee. The murderers also placed her bent right leg under her left leg. Like Libby, those involved in the murders placed tree branches in a very specific pattern on top of Abby. The pattern looks very similar to an asterisk consisting of three branches all joined in the middle. Footnote number 17. This stick configuration is a spot-on resemblance for the rune called Hegel. This rune is used to depict the word hail. Therefore, the combination of the Hegel rune found on Abby and the Ansans rune found on the tree, when combined, would proclaim Hail Odin. This sentiment, Hail Odin, is one of the many Easter eggs Brad Holder left behind on his Facebook page on multiple posts. Haktua, it might have said that. I am going through and writing down notes, but as far as I know, uh, the only thing that was of note of the sweatshirt was how the hairs had gotten around Abby's fingers, and those turned out to be, Liberty's older sister's hairs. I mean, these were, you know, I am definitely attempting to keep up with all the trial stuff, but if they said that, I missed it, so I'll have to go back and double check that. This is what the defense is getting from discovery, and I don't expect you guys to take this as gospel, but I will tell you that this all, according to, the writers of the document, the defense team, this is all stuff that came out of the state's discovery. This is not information that they went out, looking for a crazy conspiracy. This is what they found from the discovery. Pretty good, pretty good. In addition to the unusual way the girls were posed, including the stick formations placed on their body and the other unusual marking found on a nearby tree, a symbol that looks similar to the letter F appeared approximately 4 feet above the base of the tree. 19 as a footnote. Where did I miss 18? Oh, because I skipped ahead. At least one of these tree branches appears to have been cleanly cut by someone or some instrument like an electric saw rather than split or broken by hand, indicating that this was a preconceived plan. Above Abby's head were smaller sticks that had been placed over her hair, crudely mimicking horns or antlers. The amount of blood that would have perhaps been expected at the crime scene based on the location of the injuries of both girls was not visible in the crime scene photos. Number 18. The defense team speculates that because of the lack of blood visible in crime scene photos, especially concerning Abby, that the murderers may have saved blood to be used in future rituals. This is merely a theory, admittedly not supported by any facts currently in the possession of the defense, but a theory that would certainly explain the lack of expected blood at a crime scene. The defense has provided the court with 12 crime scene and autopsy photographs marked as exhibits 5 through 16 and as confidential. These photographs support the descriptions provided in the previous paragraphs. In addition to the unusual way the girls were posed, including stick formations placed on their body, and other unusual marking was found on a nearby tree. A symbol that looks similar to the letter F appeared approximately 4 feet above the base of the tree. So that's 19. The F resembles a rune called Anzus, which stands for Odin. Again, when paired with a Hegel rune found on Abbey, the combination would proclaim Hail Odin. This F symbol is the same F symbol found in many of Brad Holder's Facebook pages, which will all be attached, including Holder's creepy self drawn illustration, in which the red F rune was found at the base of a tree where a man appeared to be sacrificed on a tree. Brad Holder had an interesting Facebook thing. Additional bud spatter was found at the base of that same tree. All the blood at the base of that tree appears to have been Libby's blood as well. The defense has also provided the court with Exhibit 17, DNA documentation supporting the fact that Liberty's blood was the source of the F painted on the tree. See said exhibit as marked confidential. The defense has also provided 2 photos of this F found on a nearby tree, hereinafter called the F tree, exhibits 19 and 18 marked as confidential. The defense is also providing a photo of the F tree from a wider angle for the court to have perspective as to where the F tree is located relative to the bodies. That confidential photo has been marked Exhibit 20. And just for those of you coming in, this is third-party evidence that Judge Gohl, the reigning judge over the Richard Allen case, has hitherto denied everyone. And I do have videos of this that I did, I think about a year ago, but I figured if I had a live and I could read it, then you guys could kind of understand rather than watching 5 videos, uh, and it can kind of be fresh in relation to the trial. Now, I will tell you, if you're new coming in, that when this memo first dropped, I was like, doggone it, man, bear pig, until I started reading this. And I realized that they have depositions. They back up with page number, line number, everything that they, take from the discovery. This is not I mean, yes, it sounds like a insane, sane theory that is full man, bear, pig. But when you start to dig into it, unfortunately, in some pockets of rural Indiana, there are still hill jacks that have not moved into this century and realized we are all God's children, regardless of whatever outer packaging and level of melanin is involved in our bodies. And unfortunately, in these hills and hollers, this is where these, genetic dead ends tend to congregate and gather and, create little culty cults that allegedly unalive, according to the defense and their theory, allegedly unalive Liberty and Abby, but mostly Liberty because her mother was dating someone that had a darker skin tone than her. Under Abby's left lower back, a shoe was found. This shoe is believed to be Liberty's shoe. Under the shoe, a cell phone was found. The cell phone was later determined to be Libby's phone. The information was confirmed by a recent deposition of Liggett, Lesenby, and Holman. According to recent depositions taken of Sheriff Liggett, the famous video of the person that many people call quote unquote bridge guy was found on this phone. Additionally, allegedly found between the 2 girls, buried under leaves and dirt, was a single bullet. Another thing on this bullet was found 3 days after the state troopers and Unified Command had released the crime scene to the public. Basically, it was no longer cordoned off. Anyone and everyone could trample through it. And suddenly, magically, as if God himself and Jesus brought it down, they found this particular bullet. But they didn't take pictures of them digging it up. They didn't take pictures of where they found it. We have to kind of take their word for it because apparently no one has a cell phone these days with, these crazy newfangled cameras on them. Make of that what you will. The defense has provided 2 photos of the shoe and cell phone found under or Abby's legs and marked them as exhibits 21 and 22 and have filed confidentially. Also, the defense has provided 3 photos of a bullet purportedly found on in the ground between Abby and Libby and marked these photos as exhibits 23, 24, and 25. It should be noted as of the date of this memo, the defense team has no photographs of the bullet allegedly found between the girls after it was removed from the ground. No photo or video, for example, shows the bullet as it was pulled out of the ground. No photo or video of the bullet immediately after it was pulled from the ground. No photo or video of all sides of the bullet immediately after it was pulled from the ground. No photograph of the bullet next to a measuring device to show its length. No photos that show that what the bullet looked like once it was pulled from the ground could provide proof that this is the same bullet that ended up in evidence uh, from the evidence locker room. And Sir Winston Squeakerson, Abby's positioning and sticks coming from her head look like a Nordic tale about Freya. Freya, god of fertility, beauty, war, death, gold, and magic. Yeah, the sad thing is that if these 2 little girls, if the defense is right, if the defense is right, then these 2 little girls lost their lives because some inbred hillbilly jackass assholes got pissed off that the mom found love with someone who had a slightly different skin tone. And that is just useless. That is useless. That is, God, I wish evil had a reason other than stupid, other than petty, other than dumb. Because if it comes out, if Richard Allen is acquitted and they start looking into this Odinism line of thinking, and it comes out that these 2 little girls lost their lives because people who should be at the end of genetic evolution and possibly, first runners up for Darwin Awards, unalive these 2 beautiful girls because they didn't like who the mom was dating. There is a special level in hell if that was the case. God created all of us, regardless of our outer packaging, or the pasta monster in the sky, or the universe, or no one at all. So, 20, on September 8th, 2023, defense did receive photographs of the bullet at the forensic crime lab where it was tested. However, the defense has still not received photos of the bullets from the crime scene or crime scene technicians pulling the bullet from the ground or placing it into an evidence bag, as is standard practice, especially in murder cases. So, this magic bullet that we've been going on and on about, we don't have any evidence that they actually pulled it out of the ground. These are standard protocol things. You show where the bullet is found. We've all seen the little, old Pizza Hut number counters, that they put by the bullet. They take a picture, they take another picture, they measure that picture. This is beyond, I don't know how this case got to trial. Shockingly, in his deposition, Sheriff Liggett admitted he also has not seen any photographs of the purported bullet taken once the bullet was pulled from the ground. 21. Liggett Depot, page 69, lines 11 through 18. So they're not pulling this out of their ass, you guys. This is all coming from depositions and discovery that they were given. In other words, the only photographs that the defense has found in discovery that it has received are of the bullet still buried in the ground. At this time, the defense has no idea if A, photos of the bullet after it was removed from the ground even exist, or 2, the photos exist, but the state has not yet turned those important photographs over to the defense, or 3, the defense has missed these photos in voluminous discovery. Either way, the defense has asked prosecutor to please locate these photographs. Underlined for emphasis, one man alone completed all these tasks in less than 1 hour and 17 minutes. Footnote 22. Jerry Holman testified in his deposition that investigators estimated the time of death as occurring somewhere between 2:30 and 3:30. Let's see here. Holman deposition, page 17, lines 6 through 21. Publicly, Liggett has claimed under oath that a single solitary person was responsible for abducting and murdering the girls. Richard Allen, 23. Liggett deposition, page 67, lines 13 through 19. Claiming publicly that Richard Allen alone would allow Liggett to continue to proclaim that the murders are not the result of a coordinated abduction and subsequent ritualistic sacrifice at the hands of a pagan religious cult. No, if Liggett continues trying to convince everyone publicly that one man and one man alone, Richard Allen, performed all the tasks when Liggett must then he must convince others, including the public, to ignore the voluminous mountain of evidence that supports the coordinated efforts of multiple Odinites. However, you will later learn in this memoranda that Liggett's claim that one man acting alone, and certainly not organized band of cultists, murdered those girls is actually not something that he, Liggett, privately believes, based on one-on-one conversations with other law enforcement. And my mini me, of course. At Mo in the Deep End, it got to trial because in third world countries where the judicial system is political and peace forces are also political, corruption is rife. True that. Still, to be fair to Liggett, his proclamation under oath, let's test Liggett's claim that one man, Richard Allen, acted alone by reviewing all the tasks that this 5'4" man would have to accomplish in order to pull off the abduction, ritualistic murder, then staged crime scene as it was found on February 14th, 2017. Now, I read this about 3 times when I first read this memo because and it will get redundant at certain points, but this explains the sheer physicality that it would take, again, one person to have set up this crime scene, especially if he was somehow, I don't know, startled by, a white van. White van, you guys? I don't know. Call me crazy, call me a person that's watched too much Law& and Order, Special Victims Unit, but you have a white van and this happens near me and I am the police chief, I am going to be on you until you explainarate where you were that day, because if you have a white work van, we are going to have to talk. Yes, it is profiling. Yes, I understand it's not exactly scientific, but you have a white, free puppy van, then we're gonna have to talk. Okay, so number 1, this one man would have to be solely responsible for marching Abby and Libby down a steep hill. 2, this one man would then have to had marched both girls through the woods for some distance. 3, at some point in this time, this single solitary man would have to cross a cold river whose depth was nearly at 3.5 feet. Footnote 24, find attached exhibit 26, which is the U.S. Geological Survey depth rating of Deer Creek near Delphi, Indiana, taken from a measuring station near the crime scene on February 13th, 2007 at 2:15 p.m. So they have even researched how high the water would have been and used the government's measures for their document. At this depth, if the water were only 2 feet higher, Richard Allen's whole body would have been immersed from head to toe. 4, with the cold river water rising well above his waist, this man acting alone has to worry about himself crossing the rushing river, as well as trying to corral 2 girls and keep them from running or screaming, knowing that houses are not that far away. 5, this man on his own would have then had to march the girls up to the site of the murders, while all 3, because of the depth of the water, were wearing undergarments, pants, shirts, jackets, socks, and shoes that were drenched with water from the river crossing. 6, once he and the girls arrived at the murder scene, single solitary person that would somehow have to subdue either Abby or Libby in rope or some other restraining device in order to have the ability to unalive the unsubdued child without fear that the other child would run away and scream. 7. Because of the lack of blood on the girl's clothing, each child would have had to been completely disrobed before the single solitary man unalived the first victim. So the man acting alone either asked each child to disrobe or assisted in the disrobing. 8. Trooper Jerry Holman of Unified Command has confirmed that both girls were nude at one point in time as Liberty was found at the crime scene completely naked, while evidence showed that, quote, Abby at one point in time had her clothes off, end quote. Footnote number 25. And that is from the Holman deposition, page 79, lines 6 through 7. 9. Once the girls were disrobed and naked in the middle of the forest in the middle of the day in February, and once he had subdued one of the girls to prevent her from running away, the man acting alone would finally have to unalive the girls. 10. This man acting alone would have to pull a ceremonial knife or whatever sharp instrument was used and inflict fatal injuries to the neck of the first child. It is unknown which child perished first, while the second child watched, hopefully without screaming or becoming so hysterical that the child was uncontrollable. Then 11, this man acting alone would then walk over to the second child who was somehow still subdued and inflict the same fatal injuries to her neck. 12, autopsy notes taken by Liggett revealed that the pathologist stated that because of the way a particular vein was severed, Abigail unfortunately suffered a slow death. 26. Find attached and marked as Exhibit 27, Liggett's autopsy notes. The defense has not yet deposed the pathologist to determine what the phrase, a slow death means in terms of timing, whether it's 5 minutes, 25 minutes, or 55 minutes or more. 13, to give Liggett as much additional time needed to sell his preposterous story that one man committed all of those tasks in a short period of time, we will presume that this one man acting alone took Abby's life first and Libby was second, so that he, the lone killer, could efficiently handle all other tasks necessary while Abby suffered, unfortunately, her slow death. 14. Additionally, even after Abby finally would have passed away, the man acting alone would have then had to wait enough time for the blood to stop escaping from Abby's neck and for that to stop flowing, as there was little to no blood found on any of the clothing Abby was wearing other than around the neck area, both undergarments and outer garments, meaning that a single solitary man likely clothed Abby's dead body after the flow of blood ceased. 15. Once this man acting alone inflicted the injuries to Abby's neck and she was dying, he would have left Abby on the ground somewhere away from the scene where she was ultimately laid to rest, as there was little blood at the scene where she was laid to rest and posed, where the man acting alone also placed sticks on her bodies. 16. While waiting for Abby, they continue to go on about her slow death. I'm not going to. This is already. When you have kids, you try to keep yourself away from this case, but having two blonde-headed, girls about the same age that Abby and Libby would be had they, survived, a little younger, a couple years, the slow death thing, I get what they're trying to put in there. I get it. They're trying to, again, show that this would be too much for one person, but I am going to admit that as I'm reading it, because I'm reading it. So while waiting for Abby to pass away, the man acting alone would then have used his ceremonial knife or whatever sharp object he used to inflict Libby's fatal injuries at the base of F tree where Libby's blood was found. 17. while one, waiting for Abby to pass away, and then two, while waiting for the blood to stop escaping from her fatal injuries, this man acting alone would then grab Libby's body from F tree, where she was probably unalived, dragged her to her final resting place at the base of the tree where she was found. 18, while waiting for Abby to continue to pass away and then waiting for the blood to stop draining from her neck, this man acting alone would then have had to pose and position Libby's body in the manner which her dead body was found at the scene. 19, again, while waiting for Abby to pass away and for her blood to stop flowing, this man acting alone would then have to select a variety of tree branches and sticks with the ultimate purpose of placing them on Liberty's dead body. 20, after selecting the branches and sticks, this man acting alone would then gather those sticks and branches. 21, after gathering selected branches and sticks, this man acting alone would have to carefully arrange the sticks in the pattern found at the crime scene. He would A, have to take the largest and longest of the branches and use his dexterity to lift that large branch over Libby's left shoulder next to her head. 2, he would then have to take the smaller stick and place it under Abby's neck on the straight line from Libby's right shoulder to her left shoulder, but over the previously laid out large branch that the man acting alone placed over Libby's left shoulder, described in 14A. Next, he would have to grab one of the longer sticks and place it along Libby's left thigh near her private area. The stick would then be placed alongside the right side of Libby toward her head, but over the shorter stick discussed in 14C above. The stick starting near Libby's private area would form the right half of the V, along with the stick discussed in 14D. Next, in order to form what can be described as the V, the man would have to gather another stick, place it on Libby's left thigh near her private area, and connect it with the stick described in 14C to form the base of the V. Then this man would run that stick essentially along the left side of Libby's body over the large branch that is mentioned in 14A. The stick placed on Libby's left thigh would also connect and, in fact, may even be attached to, as the photo makes it hard to tell, the stick described in 14B. 22. At some point in time, once, Abby had passed away and was at peace, thank Jesus, this man acting alone would have to gather the discarded clothing from both girls. So you have to remember now, if what the defense's theory is correct, that, she was nude at some point, which the Unified Command also concedes. He is going to have to dress a body of dead weight. I mean, any parent who's had toddlers, think when they go into the limp political prisoner mode. So, not only that, but with wet clothing. So, I want you to keep that in mind because he supposedly got spooked and, did all this in like 19 minutes, according to the state's new theory. So, this man would then have to redress Abby's, after she's passed away, starting with the undergarments that Abby was wearing without leaving any blood, his own, Libby's, or Abby's, on the undergarment or any undergarments except around the neck area where she was mortally wounded. 24, this man acting alone would have to use his dexterity to lift Abby's dead body in order to maneuver the first bra onto Abby's dead body. Footnote number 27. Abby was wearing two bras. The first bra on top of Abby's skin, but under the second bra was a traditional looking black bra. And the second bra found on top of the black bra under a pink shirt, this second bra was what the defense would call a gray sports bra. So that was Liberty's bra. So let's see here. This man acting alone would then have to use his dexterity to secure this black bra onto Abby. This man acting alone would then have to locate the second bra that Abby was wearing. This man acting alone would then have to use his dexterity to lift Abby's dead body in order to maneuver a second bra onto her body. This man acting alone would then use his dexterity to secure the second woman's bra onto Abby. Once both bras were secured onto Abby's dead body, this man acting alone would locate the pink shirt that Abby was wearing underneath the sweatshirt. This gets a little redundant, but you really have to think these are steps that you couldn't rush if you were trying to keep, and especially not get blood all over, not get a bunch of evidence all over. So the sheer physicality in this crime scene is just it beggars belief as to how someone could do this by themselves, and especially Richard Allen, a person who had already had a heart attack, who is not an imposing figure. And I don't mean that as a disparagement. He's not very tall. He kind of has the Midwest dad bod at that time. So it does beg our belief a little bit that he could do this silently, surreptitiously, without losing control as a first-time crime, a first-time crime that we know of. So this is a high risk area to do an abduction and a crime scene. This is a very public area. They have to remember this is in February, so while it is a densely wooded area around there, the foliage and kind of the ground brush is going to be lessened. And I do severely question how they did not find the girls that evening because as a pale person, and Liberty was about my skin tone, if you put us naked in the woods, we're gonna glow like a damn glowworm from the 1980s where you push our little tummies and our face lights up. And there weren't enough tree branches for it to be obscured. Once the pink shirt was located, the man alone would likely have positioned Abby's arms above her head to make it easier to place the pink t-shirt into onto Abby's body. Once Abby's arms were positioned over her head, the man acting alone would have to place the opening at the bottom of the shirt just above Abby's outstretched arms. Once the bottom opening of the pink shirt was positioned just above Abby's outstretched arms, the man acting alone would have to use his dexterity by lifting Abby's left arm and placing it into the pink shirt. Once the man acting alone maneuvered Abby's left hand and left arm through the bottom of the pink shirt, he would have to move Abby's left hand and left arm toward the left armhole of the pink shirt. He would then have to maneuver Abby's left hand and left arm toward the left armhole of the pink shirt. He would have to use his dexterity to pull up the left arm and through the left armhole on the pink shirt. Once he had done all that, he would have to use his dexterity by picking up Abby's right arm and placing it in the bottom entry hole of the pink shirt. So this just goes on. I mean, think about it step by step. If you have ever dressed a wet or fit having toddler, or when they're passed out asleep and you're just trying to get some clothes on them, this is by no way an easy task. So it's going to go through all of the clothing that Libby had on her and how her body was high enough off the ground to avoid getting any dirt on the pink shirt, as photographs show that the pink shirt was clean. So not only did he have to do all this, he either sat her up and put her clothes on that way, which I don't know how you're going to do that, but she had no dirt on this pink shirt. So there is something going on here. It is likely that once the murderer redressed Abby in her pink shirt, and that pink shirt never touched the damp, dirty ground, as there was no dirt on the shirt whatsoever, unlike the wet shirt found on Libby's backside, the wet dirt also found on the sweatshirt that Abby was ultimately dressed in. This would mean that once the man redressed Abby in the pink shirt, that he would have likely held the upper portion of Abby's body up with one hand while grabbing the sweatshirt with the other before placing the sweatshirt on Abby. It's going to go into that sort of sequence again of how, you put your one arm in, you put your one arm out, and you put the sweatshirt on. But these are 46 steps already that you're going to have to do to, get this crime scene to look like it looked. Okay, so then once acting alone, having secured the first bra and the second bra and the pink shirt, then the sweatshirt onto Abby's dead body, he would have had to locate Libby's jeans, which were found on Abby. Once this man acting alone had located Libby's jeans, this man would have had to place the opening of Libby's jeans at Abby's feet. Once he placed, so you guys know how to put on pants. But I mean, again, this is wet, heavy denim fabric. This is for all intents and purposes, dead weight that you are trying to clothe this body in. Okay, so then we go through all the rigmarole on how you put on jeans. Although technically, if you're gonna stay, oh, interesting. I will let you know. I don't know. I try to keep the family out of this. I can't imagine the tragedy and horror that just losing your girls like this. Again, it is the very nightmare that every parent has when you let your kids start going out and exploring the world, learning to fly, learning to fall on their own, and realizing that there are real live monsters out there and they wear human faces. Okay, so then he moved on to Abby's Converse tennis shoes. Once the man acting alone had located Abby's black Converse tennis shoes with white laces, he would have to use, his strength and dexterity to lift the left leg with one hand while using the other to place Abby's tennis shoe on her left foot. He would also then have to do the same thing with the other foot. He would then have had to, you know, put them on both of the feet. Once he did all of that with the shoes on Abby's feet, he would have had to locate right twigs and right sticks that could be fashioned into antlers or horns. Tw- uh, 28. Once those sticks, were found, then the man could have laid those sticks or twigs over Abby's hair so they crossed and crudely resembled antlers. Since there appeared to be no blood on Abby's tennis shoes and other clothing other than around the neck area, this man acting alone would have had to be extremely careful to avoid any of the blood that came out of her neck as well as Libby's neck. Because the river is so close to the crime scene, the man acting alone could have also walked to the river following, unaliving the girls in order to wash and clean the blood from his hands before touching Abby's body and before placing the clothing back on her body. Another possible explanation as to how Abby had no visible blood on her body or clothes other than near the site of the wound is that this man acting alone had hanged Abby on a tree, stringing her up by the feet. Footnote number 29. In one crime scene photo, a red or a yellow rope can be viewed. This photo is attached and marked as Exhibit 28, filed as confidential. Now, as crass as this is going to sound, I live in rural Indiana. And like I said yesterday, if you have not seen a deer being field dressed on a swing set in the backyard, then you are not doing real Indiana living. So it is not outside the realm of possibility that they were hung, especially with the upward flowing direction of the blood, hung slightly upside down or at a decel or a decline in order to facilitate their bloodletting, if we want to be honest about what this really was. Now, this method, consistent with pagan sacrifice rituals found on Brad Holder's Facebook page, would allow the blood to drip out of Abby's neck more quickly and also prevented the blood from desecrating Abby's body, especially if the man acting alone was able to hold Abby's arm away from her body as the blood spilled out of her neck. Once this man acting alone had successfully completed the task of locating and putting on Abby's tennis shoes, he would have to identify certain sticks that he could place on Abby's body. Now, because at least one of the branches appeared to have a clean cut end, this man acting alone either A, brought out his saw, a saw that he either stashed at the murder scene ahead of time or had carried on his person, uh, while, let's see, carried on his person while he walked on the bridge and then used that saw to cleanly cut the end of at least one of the branches, or B, located a branch with a clean cut end that he, the man alone, had either A, stashed ahead of time at the murder site, had carried with him on his person while walking the high bridge before abducting the girls, or the man acting alone just happened to have found a branch with a clean cut end on the grounds in the woods. 30. Later in this brief, you will see a Facebook post in which, a few weeks before the murder, a man that looks like Patrick Westfall is using an electric saw to cut a tree branch. Brad Holder then leaves a comment that says, quote, cutting runes. See footnote 99. Before placing his three hand-selected sticks on Abby's dead body, the man acting alone would have to position Abby in a way that she had been found. First, he would have had to grab Abby's right hand and bend it at the elbow towards Abby's face so that the arm was resting on Abby's chest with Abby's right hand near the right side of her face. Next, the man acting alone would have had to grab Libby's left hand, bend it at the elbow toward the left side of Abby's face, then with the arm and hand resting on Abby's chest, with her left hand near the bottom of the left side of her face. He would have then had to, position Abby's right and left arm in the specific way that he wanted and would have taken Abby's right leg and bent it at the knee. He would have then had to take, the bent portion of Abby's right leg below the knee and placed it under Libby's left leg, which was positioned in a straight line. And let me bring back this so we can remember what that looks like. So this is I don't want to join Reddit. No one ever does. But this is how the crime scene looked. So you have to manipulate these bodies, get all of these tree branches, make sure that these branches stay on the way you want them to so that they get, an absolute, this was absolutely posed. That being said, I am not a copologist. I am not, Clarice Starling. I am not any of those kind of people, but this looks staged to me. And, we Midwest people call a spade for the most part. Now, he would have had to position Abby's body in a way that he desired, then he could commence placing the sticks on Abby's body. He would have grabbed the largest and longest branches and placed it diagonally over the bottom of Abby's body, beginning below the right leg, over Abby's midsection, then over Abby's left shoulder. This branch was so long, it covered a few feet below Abby's right leg and a foot or so to the right of Abby's head. He would have then placed the first larger branch across Abby's body. He would have then taken a shorter stick and placed it on a line, for the most part, between Abby's right and left shoulders over her neck. Once the man acting alone was through placing the stick described in paragraph 75, he would have laid the last stick on a line across the left side of Abby's body toward the middle of her head, with three sticks intersecting at the same exact location on the left side of Abby's body. He would then, once he was finished placing the branches on Abby's body in a specific way that he desired, he would have had to place the rune on the tree where Libby was likely slayed. The man acting alone would have had to take some of the spilled blood from Libby, dipped his finger or some type of object into her blood. He would have had to, again, have some way of transferring this blood. He would have walked away from the bodies toward the tree where Abby had been slain. At the tree, he would have had to take his, finger or a tool and painted a line, maybe a foot long, straight down the tree trunk, about 4 feet above the ground. Footnote number 32 or 31, sorry. Yeah, I've seen that a lot. Uh, it is interesting. I mean, so this particular subset of Odinism that is Fodinism, because as you guys know, I have covered this case with Nicholas Starro. This is, a stara or actual, you know, an actual kind of homage and uh, religion based on old Nordic, you know, gods and goddesses is actually fairly commonplace in Sweden. Now, what we got in America was the inbred hillbilly stupid population of this. But that being said, there's nothing to say that, these particular Odinists, didn't take all sorts of an amalgamation of pagan activities to create this crime scene. There's nothing to say that they would be totally and completely loyal to, dead set Odinism and not involve other occult ideas. Now, 31, law enforcement officer Greg Frenzy sent Tony Liggett a video of a pagan ritual videotaped by Brad Holder, in which someone that looks like Patrick Westfall is marking a tree with his hand or fingers. See footnote 49. Once the straight line would have been painted, the man would have had to walk back to Libby to, collect more blood, to, have enough blood to finish the rune that he was painting on this tree. He would have had to now create a vertical line about 4 feet above the ground to have used, the blood to paint two horizontal lines from the ground in order to create what looks like an F. Once he had, painted the rune on the tree, the man would have to locate certain clothing items he did not place on Abby but were still on the ground, including Abby's jeans. Once he located those certain clothing items, he would have to gather them. He would then, have to leave the immediate area around the crime scene and walk to the river. Once the man acting alone reached the river, he would toss the clothing items into the river. Footnote number 32. Clothing from the girls was found in Deer Creek. Once the man acting alone had thrown the clothing items into the river, he would have to walk back up to the crime scene and canvass it to make sure he left nothing behind. He would then have to, make sure he didn't leave any DNA, hair, fingerprints, shoe prints, and the man would have been able to leave. Once he was able to leave after exerting all the energy needed to complete all those tasks, he would have to walk up a steep hill for several hundred yards through some thickets and brush until he was able to get to the road, 300 north. Although this man acting alone was somehow smart enough to keep his DNA, fingerprints, footprints, hair, and other evidence out of the crime scene, this man acting alone was apparently dumb enough to decide to walk down 300 north in the middle of the day, headed west, easily visible to the public and easily visible to anyone driving a vehicle on 300 north like Sarah Carbaugh. Once this man acting alone was able to get, onto 300 north to walk down the road in broad daylight open to the public rather than the woods under cover, this man also walked some distance westbound on 300 north before allegedly being spotted by Sarah Carbaugh at 3:57 p.m. One man, 5'4" in stature, handled all these tasks, from abduction at the High Bridge to crossing over the cold flowing river to subduing one girl while the other was killed, to the killing of the second girl while waiting for Abby to pass away, then clothing Abby with very little to any blood transfer on the clothing, then to arranging the sticks into runes, to painting the F rune on the tree, to throwing the clothing items into the river, to the departure of the crime scene, and finally to traversing hundreds of yards through the forest, then up a steep hill, then another 100 or more yards until finally reaching 300 north, all the while being so careful as to not leave any DNA or any forensic evidence behind. Were all these acts committed by one man acting alone? All of these things occurred between 17 minutes and 1 hour and 17 minutes after the girls heard the phrase, quote, down the hill, end quote, at approximately 2:13 p.m. Footnote number 33. Again, Jerry Holman testified in his deposition that investigators estimate the time of death as occurring somewhere between 2:30 and 3:30. Holman deposition, page 17, lines 6 through 21. At his August 8th, 2023 deposition, Sheriff Liggett was adamant that one person and one person alone, Richard Allen, was involved in the murder of Abby and Libby. Footnote number 34, Liggett deposition, pages 67, lines 13 through 19. However, off the record, Liggett does not believe that one man is capable of pulling off all these tasks, especially in such a short period of time, leaving behind a crime scene with no forensic evidence. As referred to earlier, Liggett says one thing publicly under oath, but a different thing off the record to his buddies. One of those buddies is former sheriff, now Chief Deputy Sheriff Tony Lesenby. The day after Liggett's August 8th, 2023 deposition, Toby Lesenby was subject to a deposition. When Toby Lesenby was asked at his deposition how many people he believed were involved in the murder of Abby and Libby, Lesenby provided a different answer than Liggett. Lesenby indicated that at least two people were involved. Footnote number 37, Lesenby deposition, page 19, lines 19 through 20. The reason Lesenby gave as to his belief that at least two people were involved in the murders was Lesenby's belief that, quote, it would be difficult for one individual to accomplish what occurred. 33, Lesenby deposition, page 29, 19, or 9 through 10. When asked if any other law enforcement officers shared this perspective, Lesenby provided a surprising answer based on what Liggett had testified under oath the day before. Yes, at least one other law enforcement officer believed multiple people were involved in the murder of Abby and Libby, Tony Liggett. According to Lesenby's sworn statement, it was common for Lesenby, and Tony Liggett to have one-on-one conversations, and that Tony Liggett definitely believed that more than one person was involved. Footnote 37. Lesenby deposition, page 103, lines 20 through 25. Lesenby got just pimp smacked when he got back to the office. Like, how dare you tell them our secret super special things? Oh. Tony Liggett, who had just the day before under oath claimed that only one person, Richard Allen, was involved in the murders, privately behind the scenes was saying something altogether different in one-on-one conversations with his law enforcement friends. If a cult consisting of more than one person in a coordinated fashion lured the girls to the bridge, abducted the girls, then collectively were able to perform all tasks mentioned in the previous paragraphs, that perspective would cut against Liggett's sworn claim that the murderer acted alone. Conversely, even more problematic for Liggett is that stating under oath that Liggett, actually believes, i.e., that more than one person was involved in the murders of Abby and Libby, would lend credence to the fact that the accumulation of evidence gathered by Murphy, Ferenczi, and Click strongly supports that on February 13, 2017, several men from a pagan religious cult were involved. For some reason, Liggett is obviously not interested in wanting anyone, including Judge Diner, to know the evidence that strongly supports an organized pagan cult being the killers. Therefore, sadly, it's not surprising that Liggett lied under oath when he claimed in his deposition that only one man acting alone murdered those girls. If Liggett had told Judge Diner that Liggett, believed that multiple people were involved in the crime, and if Liggett also provided Judge Diner with a massive amount of missing details of the Odinite involvement in the murders, including evidence of the Odinites' intimate knowledge of the crime scene, then there is no way that Diner would have or should have signed a search warrant. This court will be considering whether Liggett intentionally or recklessly concealed information and intentionally fabricated facts in his affidavit for search warrant. Liggett's duplicity under oath about the number of people he felt were involved in the murders is just one of the many people or reasons, to support the belief that Liggett intentionally concealed evidence and fabricated other evidence in his sworn affidavit. So, another function of a Frank's memo is to basically throw out, search warrants or depositions or things in which officers have been found being untruthful or, concealing evidence. Now, this is where I'm going to leave this for today because we are going to start on the Odinites' connections to the murders. And this is incredibly dense. It's an incredibly, very informational part of this memo, but it is something that I need to be fresh for, and I have to go pick the ferals up soon. So this is what I will be continuing with tomorrow. I know that, again, as I've said, this is evidence of third party involvement. It has not been allowed into the case. But I did want to give the perspective because a lot of people are saying and throwing Odinist out there as if the defense made this all up from pure, fantasy and cupcakes. They took this all from the discovery that the state gave them. And, you know, the fact that a lot of things have come together to show that this investigation was flawed from the get-go is incredibly upsetting. I hope so. I hope that, the FBI will be allowed to have a crack at this. Hopefully, they've saved some things. It also came from the FBI, absolutely. So hopefully, there's a way to salvage this and because in my opinion, and this is just my opinion alone, the state has done nothing to prove to me that Richard Allen did this. There's not DNA. There's not, hair samples. There's not fiber samples. There's not, any even soil samples that they found in his boot that could look and say, well, the diatoms and different things are, very similar to this particular soil sample. This is not a first crime. I'm not Clarice Starling, but this is a crime that was fantasized about, that was ruminated about, that, would be almost compulsive for this unaliver to somewhat, you know, draw or, mimic things and things that we are going to see, behaviors that we are going to see that I think really do, make the case for this being Odinites. And, the one time it's a crazy cult murder, not like the West Memphis Three, of course we deny it because we are Indiana and we are trying to poison you with high fructose corn syrup and no Odinism. But you guys, thank you so much for joining me. I will be starting this probably tomorrow at 9:30, going through the rest of this. This is an incredibly long memo. We are on page 46 of 136. Please, make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. If not, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate you giving me a chance. And let's see, tonight there will be no nightly newsy news because it is nearly impossible to find any news that isn't, well, political. But I will be, speaking of politics, joining a couple of streams tonight for election coverage because if you don't know, I am addicted to C SPAN. I'm a political junkie. I just know that it's not everyone's jam and don't force everyone to, talk about politics on my show. Well, goodness, civil version. This document that they pulled from the state's discovery is all fiction, so the state's discovery is fiction? Very interesting point. Any hoozle, I don't ask you guys to agree with me. It's not really my jam to tell you what to think, but I am trying to give you at least some information that is particularly dense that I can read to you and you can be informed on what the defense tried to get into the court. You can choose to believe it's a bunch of hogwash and Richard Allen's totally the guy, or you can choose to be on the other side, or you can be somewhere in the middle. That's not my job. I'm just giving you guys the information. I do have my particular beliefs, but I don't make it so you guys have to listen to any or at least agree with my beliefs. You do have to listen to them because sometimes I spout off. But I will see you tomorrow, you guys. Have a great day. Oh no, not that one. This one. Ooh, be a professional YouTuber. Know where your stuff is. Bye, you guys.